I got back from the ER after a pregnancy scare to find our shed broken into, lock busted, muddy boots tracked everywhere, and our baby gear tossed around like trash. All that damage over a $29 fine from the HOA. They had no clue my wife works in counterterrorism, but they were about to. And no, this isn't some Hollywood script. This is what happens when a wannabe militia backed by a Karen tries to play HOA in the wrong neighborhood. Freeze frame. Yep, that's me. The guy whose private well HOA Karen decided to tap into so she could illegally water her tomatoes. So what did I do? I flushed her irrigation line with raw sewage. And man, that was just chapter 1. The viewer's thinking, hold up, how is that even legal? How'd she not notice? Let's rewind. My wife and I bought this house for the space, the quiet, and the acre of untouched land where we could build our future. No HOA, that was a deal breaker for us. We'd read the horror stories online. People fined for mailbox colors or the height of their grass. Hard pass. So a year in, when we start getting these pastel notices with violation and community standards printed on them, I'm confused. Return address? GMHA, Glen Maple Homeowners Association. Total nonsense. We never joined that. Never voted. Never heard of it. Turns out, Karen, real name Cynthia, but she's textbook Karen everywhere but her license, decided to start her own pretend HOA with a couple of nosy neighbors. She even printed her own fake stationery. I should have just tossed it. Instead, I laughed about it on the neighborhood Facebook page. I said, and I quote, "If Cynthia's paper circus sends me one more notice, I'm launching my own HOA, House of Annihilation, and fining her for loud breathing." That post. 114 likes, 2 memes, and 1 angry note in my mailbox the next morning. 72 hours to correct your front lawn height or face enforcement. Taped to it, a little pink ruler. Fast forward to the real nightmare. My wife, 7 months along, collapses at the kitchen sink. We're racing to the hospital. Her blood pressure's through the roof, and the doctor's talking bed rest and preeclampsia. We're freaked out. I'm in full-blown panic. On the way home, just as I'm thanking the stars that she and the baby are okay, I see it. An envelope on the porch. Final notice. Lawn violation. $29. I don't even get out of the car. Just sit there, staring at that envelope like it's cursed. Because I know what's next. It's never been about the grass. Cynthia, sorry, Karen, has decided we're her pet project. And people like her don't stop until they burn something down. We walk in the house. Everything seems normal. Then I notice the backyard door slightly open. The shed's lock is snapped, hanging loose like it was ripped with bolt cutters. I bolt over. And yeah, boot prints. Baby stuff. The crib we just built, diaper boxes, the sanitized bassinet. All shoved around like someone was digging for drugs. Even a footprint on the baby blanket. My wife doesn't say a word. She just stands there, frozen. Her hand on her belly. I call the cops. They show up, take a report, but it's all shrugs. One of them says, technically, if the HOI believed you were storing construction supplies. I cut him off. Construction supplies? That's a stroller. He shrugs again. Might need to file a civil suit. That's when I see it. My wife's whole demeanor shifts. Not angry. Not upset. She's focused. Quiet. Nods at the officer. Thanks him. Walks inside like she's doing math in her head. I know that look. It's the same one she had when she helped take down that phishing ring targeting feds. Same one when she testified at that Senate hearing on cyber threats. Karen just walked into a trap she's not ready for. That night, I find my wife at her laptop. She's already pulled up the HOA's sad little website. And I say website generously. It's a clunky WordPress mess in Comic Sans. Donation button leading straight to Karen's PayPal. My wife's eyes are scanning like code. She doesn't say much. Then finally, she looks over and says, "They're not registered with the state. They're pretending to be a legal entity." She gives me this small, cold smile. They're finished. Next morning, Karen strolls past with her little bark machine, rocking massive sunglasses like she's dodging paparazzi. She stops, side-eyes our lawn, and raises her phone for a photo. I wave. She doesn't wave back. Just keeps stomping off like the villain from a sitcom, full of righteous rage. My wife doesn't even blink. She's already cycled past mad and landed squarely in tactical mode. Then, just when we thought things couldn't get more ridiculous in our little slice of suburban purgatory, Karen blasts an email to the entire neighborhood listserv. Subject line: Community alert. violator escalates. She accuses us of noncompliance, faking a police report, and possibly stashing dangerous materials in our shed. She even implies my wife's unstable due to hormones. Signed off, in community safety, Cynthia B. That email? Massive misstep. My wife reads it once, screenshots it, and opens a fresh doc labeled evidence log. I peek over her shoulder. She's cataloging timestamps, geolocation info, and metadata from every HOA email. She's already traced the IP and linked it to a sketchy web host used for offshore gambling. I ask if she needs backup. She says, just keep the grass trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches. She needs them to feel secure. 3 hours later, she's got something. I can tell from the shift in her expression. That spark she gets when she spots a vulnerability? It's back. I ask what she found. She smiles and says, they just handed me probable cause. Then around midnight, the sprinkler system wheezes. It coughs, sputters, and dumps gallons into our side yard. Annoying, sure, until I realize the kitchen's water pressure is gone. I trace the pipes out back, and boom, someone's rigged an extension hose into our underground well. Karen's lawn, 2 fences away, is suspiciously lush during a dry stretch. That's when it hits me. She's been stealing our water. Best part? She tapped into the same line my wife had just registered for a federal rural infrastructure program, which means DHS is about to come knocking. And just when it seems Karen couldn't have worse luck, she invites herself over for a surprise compliance check. Next chapter? Let's just say the tea she drinks isn't the only thing getting served. Karen knocked on our door at exactly 2:01 p.m. with a clipboard, a smug little smirk, and a knock that screamed, lock everything. My wife opened the door calm as a monk, polite as a blade. Karen didn't even fake asking. She said, this is a formal HOA compliance inspection. Your lack of response suggests further noncompliance. We'll be documenting for record. Then she stepped 1 foot into our house without being asked. I started to say something, but my wife placed a hand on my arm and said, it's fine. We've got nothing to hide. I knew that tone. That wasn't surrender. That was bait. And Karen bit hard. She breezed past the living room, uninterested in anything not involving hedges or fences. She beelined for the backyard like she was about to uncover a cache of contraband. Every few steps, she jotted notes or snapped pics on her ancient Android. She took a photo of our mowed lawn and muttered, still looks aggressive, which made me want to ask what a passive lawn looked like. But again, my wife stayed silent. She just offered Karen lemon tea and drifted behind her like a silent grim reaper in yoga pants. When Karen reached the shed, she acted like she hadn't broken in days ago. She peered in with dramatic suspicion, like the stroller might morph into a meth lab. My wife leaned against the fence and said casually, want to see our permits for the foundation install? Karen froze. Permits? She stammered. For what? The concrete pad under the shed. My wife replied smoothly. County Code 14.27 for auxiliary storage buildings. We submitted digitally. I can email you. Though technically, you're not a registered municipal agent, so I don't have to. Karen blinked like she just got roasted in 3 different ways. She regrouped by taking another irrelevant photo and said, we're revising visual obstruction guidelines. This shed might violate them. My wife smiled. Oh, are those updates filed with the state HOA registry? Karen stalled. They're in draft. Internal policy, pending review. Translation? She made them up while watching HGTV. After the inspection, Karen parked herself in our driveway to deliver what sounded like a presidential address. You'll receive a follow-up in 7 business days. I recommend addressing several concerns. Continued disregard will lead to formal action. Then she pivoted and strutted away, her tiny dog yipping behind like an angry toy soldier. My wife waited until they were gone, then calmly walked inside, opened her laptop, and launched what I can only call a digital slow burn takedown. Step 1. Install 3 hidden security cams around the yard. 1 inside a garden gnome. 1 in a fake birdhouse. The last one, disguised in the solar lamp by our mailbox. Then she activated a metadata tracker she'd only ever used in internal threat training at work. Every email Karen sent from her fake HOA account was now silently backed up to a secure folder on our cloud drive. I asked my wife what her goal was. She didn't even flinch, didn't need more proof, no extra records, no deep dive into harassment trends. If Karen pushed 1 more inch, We'd file a formal complaint with the State Consumer Protection Board, and if it came to it, take it federal under a civil rights claim. She was running an illegitimate organization pretending to have legal power, targeting us with clear discrimination, especially against a pregnant woman. I nodded like I got it all, then went outside and mowed the lawn exactly to 2 inches. We weren't about to give Karen anything she could twist into a violation. The strategy was clear: let her keep digging her own hole. But Karen? Patience wasn't her thing. That night, an email hit the neighborhood listserv titled, "Urgent Community Safety Alert." It came from Karen's so-called HOA email and directly named us, accusing us of being threatening, possibly stockpiling dangerous materials, and acting erratically due to health issues. My wife read it once, silent. Then she whispered, "She just crossed the line." Within the hour, she filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office. Screenshots, email headers, timestamped footage of Karen sneaking into our shed, the whole works. She included a note identifying herself as a Homeland Security employee, complete with credentials and clearance details. Then she CC'd the listserv and sent a separate email to Karen, attaching the complaint with a calm, precise message. "Cynthia, you have 48 hours to retract your defamatory statements, cease all unauthorized activity under your unregistered HOA, and formally acknowledge your unlawful entry onto our property. Failure to do so will result in legal action, both civil and federal. I suggest you consult legal counsel." I stood there as she hit send. She didn't even blink. By morning, Karen's car was gone. By lunchtime, 3 members of her so-called HOA board had resigned via group email. One even sent me a private message. I thought this was just a gardening club. I didn't know she was actually breaking laws. Another admitted, "She told us your wife was unemployed and unstable." I'm really sorry. But Karen? She doubled down. That evening, as if she hadn't stirred up enough chaos, she hosted a private, emergency HOA board meeting at her house. Calling it private was a joke. Half the neighborhood saw folding chairs on her front lawn. Karen stood on her porch and gave a speech like some off-brand president, announcing made-up policies and citing fake codes like Yard Act 42-17. She even claimed we'd been flagged by local authorities. Funny thing was, we'd just had coffee with the real cop, who lived 3 houses down. He rolled his eyes so hard we thought he'd strained something. What Karen didn't know: my wife had receipts on every single move she'd made, and she'd uncovered gold. Karen's fake HOA site? It was hosted on the same server once used in a shutdown sweepstakes scam, one that had been investigated for skimming personal data. And the site was still live, collecting names, emails, home addresses, totally unsecured and without any privacy notice. Not just shady, possibly a felony. That's when my wife quietly rang up a cybersecurity contact. She gave her the domain name, the host, and asked her to tag it for review. 24 hours later, we got a call from a number my wife recognized instantly. She answered, listened, and nodded before hanging up. I asked what it was. She smiled and said, "They're launching an inquiry." Then, like it was scripted, Karen showed up the next morning. She walked down our path and knocked. My wife answered. Karen didn't speak. She just held out a piece of paper. And my wife said, "Before you give me anything, you should probably know the FBI might be reviewing your financials by week's end." Karen blinked. Then my wife stepped closer. "You sure you want to keep this up?" That's when Karen did something I didn't see coming. She grinned and said, "We'll see about that." So yeah, game on. If you've never witnessed a suburban turf war disguised as a book club, allow me to introduce Karen's Tuesday night HOA meeting. No rules, no records, no legal standing. Just caffeine, microaggressions, and low-key threats. We never got an invite. Big shock. But our invite came a different way. Greg from 3 houses down sent us a grainy Ring video with a message. This seems about you." In the clip, Karen stood in her doorway, whispering to her sweater-wearing squad. One of them held a fat manila folder. Karen waved it like she was holding the Constitution. My wife watched the clip in silence. Then she flipped open her laptop and started typing. I asked what she was working on. She said, "I'm about to gather every recorded exchange we've had with that woman and organize it into a searchable PDF. I'm also forwarding this to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They've got a task force built for stuff like this." Her tone was steady, but her hands were flying across the keyboard. That was her style. No shouting, no drama, no empty threats. Just results. Clean, Precise, like defusing a live explosive. Meanwhile, Karen was busy planting a bomb of her own. Greg said the meeting wasn't just about us. It was about shaking up the community enforcement system, a fancy way of saying she wanted more power to go after anyone who didn't play by her rules. She pitched a new set of bylaws with nonsense like progressive fine increases, mandatory visual checks for rule breakers, and the kicker, a clause saying homeowners who missed HOA meetings automatically lost the right to contest penalties. Straight-up tyranny, dressed in Times New Roman and laminated like a rulebook from hell. We didn't confront it head-on. Instead, my wife sent an anonymous tip to a federal consumer watchdog, attaching the bogus bylaws, shady screenshots from the HOA website, and a quick note. Data collection practices are unsecured. There may be a broader pattern. She didn't sign it. She didn't have to. Within 2 days, we got a response from a.gov address asking for more info. The subject line read, Inquiry Glen, Maple Homeowners Association Potential Violations. That was our cue to sit back and let the system do its thing. But Karen couldn't resist the need to dominate. So, 3 days later, she tried to serve us with a lien notice, claiming we owed over $200 in rising noncompliance fees. It was typed in all caps and misspelled the word penalty twice. She even tacked on an admin fee for an inspection she barged into, one she had no legal right to conduct. She left the notice under a decorative rock on our porch like some medieval tax enforcer. My wife took a photo, time-stamped it, and dropped it into the Karen Civil Violations folder. That thing was 118 pages deep. She printed a hard copy, just in case. Then came the twist. Karen's HOA site, the one hosted on some sketchy server known for expired sweepstakes scams, got flagged. One morning, she logged in to update her bogus policies and was hit with a red banner. Accounts suspended under review for terms violation. She lost it. According to a neighbor who was cracking up, she spent 2 hours in her backyard in slippers, pacing and yelling stuff like free speech and community autonomy into the wind. Meanwhile, my wife was already ahead of the game, sending the latest updates to the DHS Internal Oversight Office. There was enough now for a federal look into Karen's use of resident data, especially how she stored and misused it on a non-compliant server. But what no one saw coming, what turned this whole thing into a movie, was when the FBI showed up. It happened the next week, right before noon. A black SUV pulled up calmly in front of Karen's house. 2 agents in plain clothes stepped out, looking chill but unmistakably official. One knocked. Karen probably thought it was a delivery or a neighbor asking about mulch. Instead, she got flashed with badges. The conversation didn't last long. One asked to come in. The other stood outside, casually scanning the street. Minutes later, a second vehicle rolled in. This one was marked DHS Enforcement. 2 agents stepped out, looking like they could sniff out a cybercrime blindfolded. They walked in with a laptop bag and a warrant. By then, a few neighbors had drifted out, checking their mail or watering non-existent plants. I stood on my porch with coffee in hand, watching Karen's little empire implode. She tried to stay cool, tried to smile, but her body gave her away. Tight shoulders, darting eyes, that twitch she usually saved for spotting weeds in a yard. The agents walked out 20 minutes later with her laptop and a stack of folders. They didn't say much, but one gave me a slight nod as he passed. Karen stood frozen at her door, watching them disappear with everything. She looked smaller, less queen bee, more totally screwed. That afternoon, I asked my wife what kind of charges were on the table. She said, depends. If it's just misuse of data, probably civil penalties. But if she was collecting personal info without consent and taking money under fake rules, that's criminal fraud. And if she accessed our property records, that's identity theft. She sipped her tea. They'll sort it out. By nightfall, Karen went completely silent. No emails. No Facebook monologues. No awkward lawn patrols. Her flag, usually waving proudly above her porch, had vanished. The next morning, she was a no-show for her routine dog walk. The day after that, she skipped the HOA board meeting, one she'd scheduled herself. Still, in true Karen form, she couldn't just vanish completely. Not quite. The evening following the federal visit, she slipped a letter into our mailbox. It wasn't typed out. It was handwritten in cursive with purple ink, like some odd apology from a ghost stuck in a Jane Austen novel. It said, I hope you're happy. You've endangered the harmony of this neighborhood. I only ever wanted to keep things safe. But now everything is falling apart. You should be ashamed of yourselves. No name. No return address. Just petty blame cloaked in sparkly penmanship. My wife read it, let out a short laugh, and slid it into the evidence folder without saying a word. The neighborhood, once quietly on edge, now buzzed with a sense of mutual relief. Word started spreading about the FBI showing up, the HOA site getting shut down, and Karen now hiding behind closed blinds. A few neighbors even sent private emails thanking us. Turns out we weren't the only ones she'd messed with, just the only ones who pushed back. Just when it felt like the worst might be over, a certified letter arrived from the county clerk. Karen had filed paperwork. She was trying to make the HOA official. She'd submitted forms to register Glen Maple HOA as a real entity, with herself crowned as president for life. That's when my wife gave a smile I hadn't seen before. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something closer to excitement. She said, "Good. Now we get to take it down publicly." And that's when the real game started. See, filing an HOA makes you subject to actual oversight, actual legal repercussions, actual government attention. Karen, in all her pride, didn't get that by formalizing her power trip. She'd just opened the door and handed the law a lemonade. The paperwork she sent in was packed with bold statements, fake names, and a mission statement that read like it came from a startup manual on authoritarianism. She named over 30 houses as members. Most had never signed, never voted, and never agreed, including ours. My wife stared at the scan for about 10 seconds and said, she just made up homeowner info. If she submitted it online, that's wire fraud. Within the hour, my wife had filed an official objection with the county clerk, citing false representation, forged names, and intimidation. She attached a notarized statement and asked for a temporary stop on the registration. But that was just the outer layer. Behind the curtain, she was working on the full takedown. She'd already organized video of the illegal shed break-in, surveillance clips, and every HOA violation Karen had issued without real authority. She wasn't just blocking the HOA. She was aiming to tear it down to the foundation. Then came the court date. It was set for a Thursday afternoon at the local district courthouse that looked more like a worn-out DMV than a place justice lived. Karen showed up in a pantsuit that screamed small-town tyranny, carrying a binder full of printouts and pages of what seemed to be color-coded neighborhood drama. She strutted in like she was collecting a trophy. My wife, meanwhile, wore a cozy cardigan over her maternity dress and carried only a slim case and a USB drive. No theatrics, just facts. The judge, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and zero tolerance for games, opened by asking for initial remarks. Karen went first and, predictably, launched into a speech about community values, societal decay, and how our refusal to comply put everyone at risk. She claimed we refused lawn maintenance, hoarded supplies, and were hostile to her volunteers. My wife didn't interrupt. She just sat there, hands folded over her stomach, letting Karen unravel herself. Then it was our turn. My wife stood up, introduced herself, and handed over the USB. It contained a clean presentation, footage of the shed break-in, fake violation notices, email metadata from the HOA account, financial records showing Karen accepting payments to her personal PayPal, and copies of ongoing state and federal complaints. She wrapped up by stating Karen had submitted names to the county, 3 of which had already filed affidavits denying any connection. The courtroom went quiet. Even Karen seemed thrown off. The judge let out a slow breath and said, "This matter appears to exceed the scope of a neighborhood dispute. Given the evidence submitted, I'm issuing a temporary suspension of the HOA registration pending further investigation. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the county prosecutor for review." Karen tried to argue, but the judge shut her down. "If you speak again without being asked, I'll hold you in contempt." That was the first time Karen sat without talking. We walked out without acknowledging her. Back home, a few neighbors had gathered by our driveway. One of them, a woman who'd lived on the block for 2 decades, stepped up and said, "Thank you." She'd been making everyone's life miserable for months. One day, a neighbor gave my wife a small bouquet and said, "For the baby, and for being a badass." Not long after, the story broke. It didn't make headlines, just a blurb in the neighborhood newsletter and a note on the county site. But that was all it took. Unauthorized HOA under investigation for fraud, harassment, and data violations. Karen's name wasn't listed, but everybody knew. And once word spread, so did the calls. Ex-members started speaking out. Turns out Karen had fined senior citizens for leaving porch lights on after 10 p.m. She threatened to report a single mom for too many cars in her driveway. She even told a veteran with PTSD that his American flag was visually disruptive. They were all quiet victims, too worn out or afraid to push back. But with her influence crumbling, they finally spoke up. The final nail came when the IRS stepped in. My wife, being thorough, flagged Karen's personal PayPal during one of her complaints. And sure enough, Karen had pocketed over $10,000 in fines across 2 years, none of it reported. Days later, she got hit with an audit notice. The neighborhood shifted. The HOA sign Karen had installed at the front entrance vanished without a word. The phony newsletter stopped. Her allies either ghosted her or apologized. Even her dog, the one that used to bark like it hated joy, went silent. As for Karen, she vanished behind drawn curtains, porch lights dark, no more morning strolls. Every now and then, we'd see her late at night, walking her dog with sunglasses on, like she was hiding from her own past. Meanwhile, we threw a backyard hangout. Nothing major, just folding chairs, iced tea, cookies. A hand-painted sign over the gate read, "No fines zone." Neighbors dropped by, swapping laughs and stories. Someone brought a cake that read, "R.I.P. HOA," in big red frosting. It wasn't subtle, but it was perfect. My wife sat under the canopy, sipping decaf, hand on her belly, looking more relaxed than she had in ages. A month later, we welcomed our daughter, strong, healthy, loud enough to shake the walls. We named her Lily. Karen never sent a card, but she did get one, a legal notice. Her motion to revive the HOA was denied. Her personal liability case was escalating, and multiple neighbors had filed a civil suit for harassment and damages. As for us, Karen never reached out again. Our lawn, still cut to 2.5 inches. Our shed, reinforced and full of peace and quiet. And my wife, still undefeated. So if you're ever up against a Karen who thinks she owns the block, just remember, some folks build fences, others build cases. And the next time someone breaks into a pregnant woman's shed over a $29 grass violation, they better pray she's not counterterrorism trained. Her flag, which usually waved proud over the porch, was suddenly gone. The next morning, no sign of her dog walk. The following day, she skipped her own HOA meeting. But of course, in true Karen fashion, she couldn't just fade away. Not yet. That night after the federal visit, she left a letter in our mailbox. Not typed. Handwritten in purple cursive, like a dramatic ghost from the 1800s. It read, "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed the balance in this community. I only ever try to keep it safe. But now it's all falling apart. You should be ashamed. No name. No return address. Just passive-aggressive blame dressed in glitter ink." My wife gave it a single laugh and filed it straight into the evidence folder. The neighborhood, once tight-lipped and tense, now buzzed with relief. Folks whispered about the feds showing up, the HOA site going dark, and Karen vanishing behind her blinds. A few even emailed us privately with thank yous. Seems we weren't her only targets, just the only ones who stood their ground. Then, right when we thought it was over, we got a certified letter from the county clerk. Karen had filed documents. She was trying to make the HOA official. She wanted to register Glen Maple HOA with herself as permanent president. That's when my wife smiled in a way I hadn't seen before. It wasn't pride. It was readiness. She said, "Good. Now we get to end it publicly." And that's when things really got fun. Because registering an HOA, that opens the door to serious oversight, real legal consequences, government attention. And Karen, in all her arrogance, had no clue that she was inviting the law in for a front-row seat. The paperwork she filed was wild, bold claims, fake signatures, and a mission statement straight out of a fascist startup. She named over 30 houses as members, including ours. Most had never signed a thing, never voted, never even agreed. My wife stared at the scan for 10 seconds and said, "She forged homeowner records. That's wire fraud if it was sent electronically." Within the hour, she submitted a formal objection to the county clerk, citing false info, forged signatures, and intimidation tactics. She attached a notarized statement and asked for a temporary freeze on the application. But that was just step one. Behind the scenes, she was building the full takedown. She had footage of the illegal shed break-in, surveillance clips, and a full dossier of Karen's made-up violations. She wasn't just stopping the HOA. She was erasing it. Then came the court hearing. It was set for a Thursday afternoon, in a plain-looking district courthouse that felt more DMV than courtroom. Karen showed up in a pantsuit made for a power grab, toting a binder full of screenshots and highlighter-soaked gossip. She walked in like she was collecting an award. My wife. Cardigan over a maternity dress, slim briefcase, one USB. No drama. Just facts. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes, opened by asking for statements. Karen went first, launching into a speech about unity, declining values, and how our refusal to comply put the neighborhood at risk. She said we neglected our lawn, hoarded supplies, and were aggressive toward volunteers. My wife didn't say a word. She just sat calmly, hands on her belly, letting Karen talk herself into a corner. Then it was our turn. My wife stood, introduced herself, and handed over the USB. It held a clean, organized presentation, shed break-in footage, fake violation letters, email metadata, financials showing Karen's PayPal activity, and formal complaints filed with the state and feds. She closed with this. Karen submitted false homeowner names to the county, 3 of whom had already signed affidavits denying it. The room went dead quiet. Even Karen froze. The judge took a breath and said, "This appears to be more than a neighborhood squabble. With the evidence submitted, I'm issuing a temporary suspension of the HOA registration pending further review. This case is also being referred to the county prosecutor." Karen tried to speak, but the judge cut in. "One more interruption, and you'll be held in contempt." First time I'd ever seen Karen sit quietly. We walked out without a word to her. Back home, a few neighbors were gathered by our driveway. One of them, a longtime resident who'd lived on the street for 2 decades, came up and said, "Thank you."